So without further ado, please join me in welcoming Assemblymember Rebecca Bauer-Kahan. And just want to say thank you again for being with us.
Well, thanks for having me, Kristin. It's fun to be here with all of you, even if only virtually. I miss being together at the college, but here we are. So I'm glad to get to update you and answer your questions today and chat with Kristin, which will be fun. So a little bit of an update, but I will keep it brief because I actually prefer to talk about what you want to talk about. So we'll make sure that most of this is Q&A. But, I want to thank all of you. This has been an incredibly challenging year and a half for a lot of reasons, not only just the health aspects and the numerous lives lost, and then the mental health impacts of asking our community to stay at home and stay apart, but also our businesses have suffered tremendously through this pandemic, and the economic impact has been incredibly great. And so, I think having an organization like yours that focuses on the economic vitality of our region is so critical to making sure that we have an equitable recovery, right? Our economy's booming, the California budget is stable, but our small businesses and our low-wage workers are continuing to suffer. And so we can't lose sight of that, even though we see this vibrant economy happening around us. And I know that when you envision, economic vitality for all of us, it is an equitable one. And that's such important work. So I want to thank you for being leaders in that, for being our partners in that, and to make sure that we move forward in a way that allows for equality for all Californians and to have sort of that opportunity to thrive that we want each of them to have. So a couple of things I wanted to touch on that I know are just important priorities of yours. The first is transportation. Despite the fact that a year and a half ago, the thing everybody wanted to talk about was traffic, and then everyone stopped talking about traffic because nobody went anywhere. It's back, as some of you may know. And so we need to continue to focus on transportation, ensuring that we have clean transportation options for folks and that people aren't spending an hour and a half each way getting to their jobs, which was the normal before the pandemic. And so a lot of that will be interesting to see. Some of it will be a change in the way people work. As we know, a lot of companies are saying, it will now not be every day in an office, which will hopefully change those patterns. But in addition, we need to continue to focus on transportation projects. It's also a great way to create jobs for workers. So as we look to recovery, I know it's a priority in our state budget, and it's a priority for me. And so we are continuing to work very hard on ensuring the Valley Link project gets funded. I know it was an exciting budget year, both for us, but also for Congress. And so both Congressman Swalwell and the Senator and I have made requests for Valley Link to make sure that we're continuing to move that project forward to bring transportation from the Central Valley into our region, which we know will create vitality there, but also bring workers into our communities without an insane commute, which is really important. But also really focused on the 680 corridor, working with Contra Costa Transportation Authority on a shared mobility hub. I made a $5 million budget request for that. I see Councilmember Geringer excited about that. To make sure that we are continuing to focus on that part of really what is a transportation gap in the area I represent. We have wonderful BART connections through the La Miranda area into Walnut Creek and down in the Dublin-Pleasanton area, but we have this 680 corridor that is really a nut we got to crack. And I know that the Contra Costa Transportation Authority is incredibly focused, and we want to be their partners in that. We're continuing to talk about bus on shoulder. It's got to be part of our plan. And then housing. Homelessness continues to be the thing that constituents care deeply about, that we care deeply about. We have to solve our housing crisis and make sure that the unhoused individuals have the support they need. So what does that look like? It's got to be the most complicated thing that we do, I believe. But I think we've seen great success from Project Room Key. I mean, the numbers coming out of Contra Costa in their work in Project Room Key are really wonderful. And so where counties have stepped up, and to be fair, not all counties have done this in the same way as we would expect, but those counties that have really created wraparound services in those Project Room Key settings, we're seeing great success in getting people into stable housing. So continuing to fund those programs, ensuring that we're providing the services people need is really, really critical. One of the efforts I really want to touch on, because it is the thing that I spend most of my time on right now, and it really is a passion of mine, is my legislation AB 988, which focuses on mental health crisis response. This is another partnership with Contra Costa. They have been doing incredible work in ensuring that we have a non-law enforcement response to those who are in mental health crisis. And so we want to set up a state infrastructure that provides the 988 phone number as an access point into those mental health crisis response teams, and that funds those teams on the ground in the counties so that we have real meaningful mental health crisis response outside of the law enforcement setting. And this is an exciting thing because I think it will change the continuum of care that we have for those suffering. And law enforcement is a huge partner with us. They don't want to be responding to those in crisis. It's not what they're trained to do. They want to be focused on public safety, and we want our mental health professionals to support those in crisis. So that's a big lift, but we are taking it on, and we're hoping that we'll get that passed this year, and that in July of 2022, when those 988 starts ringing, it connects you folks into those incredible county services that are being set up. I would be remiss if I didn't talk about energy. You all got your Flex Alert last week, I'm sure, as we all did. So that is a real focus for me, is energy utilities, the safety of our utilities, making sure that we are keeping our eye on the community, both from a fire prevention aspect. We introduced 2 pieces of legislation, one in partnership with 2 of our local fire chiefs on ensuring that we don't have utility-caused wildfires, but also looking at how we prevent the rolling blackouts we had last year. So I had a bill that is continuing to move, AB 427. Oh no, it was held in appropriations as a 2-year bill. So hopefully we'll move it next year. But what that does is it gets the behind the meter resources, so batteries. So more and more batteries are getting onto the grid to house our solar energy that's being produced on rooftops and across our communities. We have enough power in those behind the meter resources to power our grid during the rolling blackouts, but we have no way to deploy those resources and create a market for them. So we have to focus both on ensuring we have storage of our large scale energy production, but also our distributed resources, because it's an incredible clean energy resource sitting on our grid that we're not accessing. So we have to be smart and creative and use all of the resources. So we're continuing to work on that. And although my bill isn't moving, I've used my opportunity on the Utility and Energy Commission to continue to push the PUC, because they can actually do that without us. So they should go ahead and do it, even though the bill isn't moving. And I've absolutely told them that. Lastly, the environment continues to be a huge focus for me. I'm sure we'll talk about it in Q&A, hopefully, but climate change, it's what keeps me up at night. The drought, I mean, we are seeing the real impacts. Last year was the wildfires, and right now it's the drought. That I was in a briefing last week where they discussed that the reason we are in such dire circumstances, for those of you that made it up to Tahoe this year, it wasn't for lack of snowfall, but it melted too fast because it was too hot. And that's why we're seeing what we're seeing. And so as that continues to be the case, what are we doing to be resilient? And what are we doing to be the generation that stops and turns this boat around and fixes it for future generations? So that is something I think about a lot, that we introduce legislation on, focused on, clean air. We look at clean water regularly. So making sure that we're doing our part to solve this existential crisis as I see it. So with that, I will move to Q&A. I don't want to take all the time talking.
No, I appreciate that. So thank you. My habit, I don't think I shared this with you, is I always prepare a bingo card about all the things I expect you to talk about, and so that I can just check them off as I go. And so pretty successul bingo card coverage.
How did you do? We didn't talk about schools. I was just
We did not, but we'll get there. So actually, I would love to start where you actually left off, which was, because about 45 minutes ago now, I was one of your colleague, Assemblymember Grayson's witnesses on a bill, AB 844, to create a Contra Costa Green Empowerment Zone. This idea of collaborating, creating a framework for really bringing down federal, state, local, other resources, and having a next level collaboration as we chart our course to potentially, being more reliant and more resilient on renewable sources. And just wanted to sort of invite you into that conversation. Obviously, we have this huge legacy and an important and very active, important traditional industrial energy sectors, full disclosure, very involved in our organization, that employ thousands of people and it's usually considered about 1/3 of our gross regional product. And so, so the, kind of my bias, and I'll just share it with you, and then I'd love your thoughts on things, is that what is so frustrating to me about the regulatory path that we're on is that often the very experts that can help us solve these problems are just sidelined because of the industry that they work for. And the truth is that actually our comparative advantage in green technology and water technology and all this other stuff is rooted in our industrial sector, in our really smart workforce. And so, we've got 2 of the 5 refineries applying to do renewable diesel projects. It is a really exciting time. So we'd just love for you to talk more about kind of how you see us, working on, because, we care a lot about clean air and clean water. And actually the folks that work at the refineries are some of the biggest environmentalists I've ever met. So we'd just love some of your thoughts about how we might partner with you, what you think is helpful, and talk about, kind of that, how you see this playing out.
Yeah, no, I think it's a great question. And Chevron, which I know is a partner of yours, headquartered in my district. I mean, this is, it's an important question. And I think, I'll pivot a little bit to the debate around the fracking ban, right? Which was obviously continues to be a huge debate up here. And it's something that I'm going to be frank with you, as a hardcore environmentalist, I struggle with, because what we're doing there is we're decreasing supply, but not demand, right? And so then what do? So demand stays static if we just ban fracking, but supply locally, which by the way is much cleaner and provides good paying jobs, goes down. And so how is that solve a problem? Then we're going to just ship it in, right? So then we have dirtier fuel coming in on boats, which are polluting, and being produced in, if you look at climate change as a global problem, which I very much do, that doesn't help climate change at all, right? It helps maybe regionally, but that's not the goal. That should not be our goal, right? It should be a global solution. And so what we have to look at is reducing demand, right? Not supply. And I think that's really, really critical. And as we have demand, how do we shift it to, cleaner solutions, which is you're saying we have 2 of our refineries moving to biodiesel. We've seen the numbers related to that. The emissions at the source are drastically reduced, obviously a huge positive impact for environmental justice in the communities around the refinery. But those good paying jobs with the biodiesel get reduced significantly as well, right? We see it's just a simpler process. They need less workers. And so how do we, if you believe in both environmental justice and economic justice, these cannot be separate things, right? We have to create, and I feel like this is where you get frustrated, because the people with the expertise are in the room. I get frustrated because we don't talk about these together enough. Like maybe we talk about it, but we don't come up with real solutions of how we create a pathway to good paying jobs for those workers and create clean solutions. And it's real and it's meaningful and we have to do it. And one of the things we struggle with right now as a state is storage of clean energy, right? Is there a way to create, jobs in that space that are really meaningful with, storage doesn't have to be a battery, right? It can be hydro underground. It can be a lot of different things. We need more storage of clean energy. We need more jobs. How do we create a pathway that melds the 2? And I do think that those experts that have been working in it are really going to be great partners. We just had a really interesting select committee on impact investing, focused on how our investment community is saying, we believe, given where climate change is going, that unless a company is pivoting to really focus on climate change, they're not a good bet for us anymore. So we're not going to invest in those companies, which is, going to force companies to pay more attention. So the private sector is solving this in some ways on their own, which is really interesting, and forcing industries to move in the direction of cleaner, renewable sources. And I think we should be the partners in enabling that in a just way.
Okay. Just one quick little point. The 2 projects locally are doing renewable, not biodiesel, just as I've gotten I've used, so anyway, just, it's a different one. And there's actually really good job protection, components to both of those.
Well, and I know that the trades are very much up, but the ongoing jobs are reduced. They are.
Yeah, no, but there are a lot of exciting, there's probably a few things I've heard a Boilermaker get more excited about than carbon capture, because you want to have actual projects where the skilled labor can
totally
keep doing what they're doing. So, okay. Now, moving to a couple other things, I did want to, you did mention the non-police emergency response on mental health, which is something that, you are spending a lot of your time on. And, thank you for your leadership in that space. I'm assuming that, so we are supportive of, as an organization, the Contra Costa's jurisdictions asking for Measure X dollars locally to supporting that. Is that something that you're supportive of? And do you see, are you hopeful that there will be robust funding in order to really make this work at all levels?
Yeah, so I am supportive of that, although the goal on my part is to make that Measure X money, once we come in with a funding mechanism, go to other sources so we can fund those mobile crisis response teams. So the bill anticipates a fee that will mirror the 911 fee on people's phone bills, and will cover both the phone system, the mobile crisis response teams, and the stabilization services. The exciting news about that is we only actually have to cover 15% of those mobile crisis response teams. The federal government has agreed to do an 85% match. So we can pony up the 15%, the federal government will do 85%, and Measure X can go somewhere else. And that's really the goal.
Okay, great. So wanted to, you talked a little bit about, I love that you mentioned bus on shoulder. I feel like you're speaking more fluent East Bay Leadership Council in your talking about your transportation, because obviously for the entirety of my 7 years in this role, we've been trying to talk about how to make a more robust connection between, along 680, between Walnut Creek and the Tri-Valley. And so I do think that, bus on shoulder is going to be an important component to that. I'm seeing a bunch of our transportation experts, including the chair of the CCTA that you gave a little shout out to, is on this call. And so would love to, offer us up as, what we can do to be helpful, to continue that effort. We are going to be talking about, with Amy Worth and others about, 680 and all of those important pieces. How do you, how do you see the state? I mean, we are very fortunate that there are robust revenues. I know that there's a disagreement between the state and, like that we're in this strange interregnum, perhaps we could call it, where there has been a budget passed, but obviously there is not yet agreement on the details between the legislature and the governor. So you talked about supporting Valley Link and transportation, but we just would love to hear you talk a bit more about how you see the budget, sort of this moment that we are in, and how you see the budget sort of differences resolving themselves, and just give you an opportunity to talk about any other budget priorities that you have, including transportation.
Yeah, I mean, as you know, the legislature went in with a really united front on what we believed the priorities of the state were and where the budget should be. And that's the budget we passed. Although, as you point out, we are still very much in negotiations with the administration on that. I'm hearing things are going really well. I think it's a complicated time to sort of address with all of these. In some ways, it feels more complicated this year than last year, although we had a huge disagreement after the May revise last year too. But I think it was the path forward once we came up with our solutions was pretty clear. But with all this money, what do we do with it? And it's a very different conversation. I think we are very united in transportation being critical, both, as I said, for job creation, but also for the future of California. We really need a more robust and connected transportation system in the state. So I see that, I think we're pretty united in that. Although the framework of the two budgets was pretty significant. So that's sort of where the fight starts, is which framework gets chosen. And then with that, what we do with those funds. But one of the things that I and a few other legislators have really been advocating for that we think is critical is ensuring that we're doing smart spending right now. So I think it's really key that we put into our rainy day fund, knowing that we have projections of a down economy in future years, and ensure that we pay back basically the borrowing that we did last June when we thought we were going to have such a huge deficit, to ensure that those debts are paid and we're not worrying about them in future years when we're down. And so that's a really critical piece that the legislature is pushing, and I think is important. There's lots of different funds that goes into and different paybacks, but as much of that as possible, I believe, and many of us believe, should happen this year. And then, I think, like you said, looking at what are our priorities, and housing is huge, transportation is huge, ensure education, right? I mean, we're looking at universal TK, which is an incredible investment in the future of California's children, and we know pays for itself in the long run with savings in the criminal justice system, right? Let's end that pathway to prison and really give kids the education they deserve so they can thrive. And we know preschool is critical to that. So, I think we're making some great investments in the future. And the question is, how do we do that? What programs do we do it in? And I think we'll come together on it. And I think there will be funding for projects like Valley Link and other priorities of this district.
Okay. Well, and just on that point, I did get I know that there is some interest among participants who are actually sort of chatting with me. What is your advice about how to influence the process at this moment? In the sense of like how to resolve things. Because also I would be derelict in my duties if I didn't mention the importance of thinking about transportation, not just for commuters, but making accessible transportation, right, for all folks and of all
Mhm.
abilities and
Mhm.
our elders and so, but it's a strange budget process this year. And so I would love your sense about, how to be, for anyone listening, about the particular issue that they care about the most. And for me, how do you see us being able to influence things?
I mean, I do think that both the administration and the legislature are trying to be responsive to Californians and what they want. And the fact that we see that differently at times always fascinates me. We obviously represent smaller communities. The
Mhm.
Assembly represents smaller communities in the Senate, and obviously he represents all 40 million
Yeah.
Californians. And so I like to believe that we're really in touch with what each of our community wants. And it's not united, right? I mean, we are a diverse set of 79 members right now that represent communities that look very different and want different things. And when we come together with a deal, having said what our priorities are, I think it does represent Californians, but you are the voice of Californians, right? So I think
Mhm.
to the extent that you can elevate certain priorities, it's really important. I mean, I see Debbie on this call, Debbie Toth, who last year when the May revise came out and senior services were really not getting the attention they deserved and the funding they deserved, stepped up and said, this is a priority for Californians. And we're going to let you all know that, let the legislature know, let the administration know. And we listened, right? And the final budget reflected what Californians want. And I think that is the work, right? Is
Yeah.
if we get it wrong, tell us, right? Because we are actually trying to be responsive to you. And it doesn't mean we'll be right all the time, but we want to make sure that the top priorities in the communities are being funded. And that's, I say it, and you've heard it from other people, the budget should be a reflection of our values. And that means what you guys care about. So
Yeah. No,
definitely
that's great.
definitely call us. I know many of you have a line into Assemblymember Ting. He's obviously a very important part of this. I think having Senator Skinner on the Senate side, obviously for the East Bay, is a huge boon. I think she's been a great advocate for things that in the past we haven't gotten as much attention on, from what I can tell. So, talking to members is really critical.
Well, speaking of Debbie Toth, CEO of Choice and Aging, who is a member of our board, she did notice that you didn't mention sort of elders and the master plan for aging in your comments. So, and also just the nexus between elders as being the largest growing segment of the homelessness, of the unsheltered Californians. And so just wanted to kind of put that on, the largest growing homeless population is first-time seniors. So just wanted to, it's probably already on your radar, but wanted to make sure we're putting it there. And then I did, she did want to mention that there's a planning event on Thursday that she'd love you to know about implementing all things. So we'll make sure that you have what you need on that. So then actually there was another question, kind of switching gears a little bit around going back to the energy question. Bob Brown, raised that last week. Assemblymember Grayson was with the Concord Chamber and mentioned that the legislators are moving to an all of the above energy strategy, which is encouraging because sort of, kind of from an economic perspective, you need energy to thrive. And you made the point about the demand not dropping, like why fracking is so complicated. So just wanted to get your thoughts about that, about the all of the above strategy, and wondering what you think the chances are for AB 8 and AB 118, which puts a fee on vehicles to support investments in EVs, hydrogen, alternative fuels.
Yeah, I wish Kristin were 100%, I think, right on that. I mean, I joined the Energy and Utilities Committee this year, and I'll be honest that, Assemblymember Quirk and I often talk openly in committee about our disappointment in the way bills change in that committee to not actually go as far as we would like in promoting alternative energies that the environmental community thinks are less pure, if you will, but are necessary to get us there, right? And right now, I think we're seeing climate change exacerbate so rapidly. We have to be doing everything we can to fight it. And that means an all of the above strategy. But I don't know that I feel like we are doing as much as we could on that, to be honest with you. I see, for example, one of the things we've been really fighting about in the committee is what do we do? We have all of this, we're thinning our forests because we need to do veg management.
Yeah.
And yet we aren't supporting as much dealing with those materials to create clean energy as we would like, because it's not considered a pure source. It does have some emissions, which is true, significantly less than some of our other sources. And we have to do something with those materials that we have to thin from our forests. And so, that's a fight that we're having. We had a bill last week, on from Senator Skinner focused on hydrogen, green hydrogen sources that was watered down a little bit in committee. So again, I think that we could be doing more, but I think the state is moving in that direction of really looking at what is everything we can do. How do we create an economy that supports all of these sources? But I think we could go harder, to be honest with you.
Okay. No, I appreciate that. See, it's I get to pick your brain in these moments, which is why it's great. And then, not to be too much of a jig jag, I should have seen it beforehand, but Dave Kelly, who's the longtime member of our board and an active member of ours, is lamenting the approach to homelessness really being regional rather than really being statewide. Now, Room Key and Home Key were statewide programs that were implemented locally. And so just, sort of Dave's comments, are, this should be sort of priority 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 for Governor Newsom and the legislature. And so, because it is such a concern to Californians. And I did want to just locally wanted to just give a little shout out to our policy director, Lindy Lavender, who's the chair of Contra Costa's Council on Homelessness. And so appreciated you, kind of recognizing the good work locally. But, there is this kind of difference of opinion about the amount, right? The big city mayors requested $30 billion to work, and there's talk of 12, the governor proposed $12 billion to work on homelessness statewide. What's your sense of the sort of statewide effort on homelessness and how we can really, I appreciated you talking about that this is the most complex thing that you're working on, but we have to do it. So we'd just love to give you a little bit more chance to talk about that.
Yeah. Now, I don't know how many of you are as geeky as I am and read all of our auditors' audits. She is one of my favorite people in Sacramento. She's so brilliant. And, she just gets into these issues and really dives into them. And the audit she did recently on homelessness spending was, yeah. I don't even know what the adjective I should use there.
No, it was eye-popping, difficult, all the things. There are, as many of her audits are, but yes.
Right. No, I know. I'm like, one day we're going to get an audit where she doesn't find.
Exactly. She's like, everything's fine, actually.
Maybe.
But
right?
Yeah, we've got a lot.
I'm waiting for it. I'll let you know when it happens.
Yeah.
But, so when they're asking for more money, but we're seeing just such egregious spending with no results and no accountability, I pause. I'm like, is the problem money? I don't know. The problem is money, people. I think the problem is really looking at what good programming is happening. Now, Assemblymember Gabriel had a bill last year that I co-authored on accountability and homeless spending before the audit came out, telling us how bad it was. And I do think we need to do more to say, what's working, right? We have the counties play such a critical role in this. And I hear we should be doing everything as a state that we can do, but the counties are our providers of services who know their local communities. And again, if you think about the counties in California, you have urban counties, you have rural counties, suburban counties. Our counties look really different. And so for us to have a one size fits all approach for all those counties isn't, I think, the smartest thing. I think it really is us supporting that local work, but ensuring that we're getting the data to know what's working, what's not working. Look at this program in LA that has just popped and it is successful. And let's share that with the other counties and make sure they're doing that, right? Because in urban counties, this is something that will work. So I think we have a really important role in both funding it, but ensuring that there's accountability, oversight, and understanding of where our successes are, where our failures are, and what are the causes of homelessness, right? We know that when someone falls into homelessness, there's different data, but they're homeless for at least 14 months, if not longer. And so preventing homelessness is so critical to winning this battle. And so what are the triggers? I think we have a huge role to play there. One of the things I saw in my work as an attorney, I did homelessness work for many years, that I think people don't quite understand is that the fines and fees we charge in California are a huge homelessness trigger. You get a fine that you and I don't bat an eye at. They can't pay it. The cost goes up and up and up till they lose their driver's license. A lot of low wage workers require a driver's license to hold a job. Now I lose my job because I couldn't pay that fine. And guess what? I end up homeless, right? So what are those triggers that are landing people into homelessness? How can we change that dynamic? Because we do play a role in policymaking as it relates to that. Making sure we're looking at what programs are working, funding them, and actually solving the core problems of homelessness. I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about my work in mental health. A third of our homeless population is suffering from mental illness, and then you can put substance abuse on top of that. And we have a huge portion of the population that needs more than a home, right? They need substance abuse help. They need mental health care. And so we have to have a vibrant set of services, again, partnering with our counties that are those incredible providers to make sure we're meeting everyone where they are and giving them the services they need.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I mean, and Dave's follow-up, so appreciates those comments, and then Dave's follow-up, but you can see it probably yourself in the chat around, going around Oakland and San Francisco, the significant number of tents and unsheltered Californians that we see struggling. It can feel like nothing is working. And so just want to continue to encourage you to work on that and to get accountability for results, because and just to plant a seed, the state of Washington has a center that analyzes the effectiveness of spending. We are very good at identifying how much we spend, and in California, we are awful for knowing what we get for it. And so they've been able to close prisons and change what they've done as a state because of this sort of analysis and effectiveness work. So that's just my little plug about effective governance. That you
know, and we have some of the best universities in the nation that could do that work for us.
Absolutely. So, just wanted to, there's still a lot of things to cover. So, wanted to just give you a sense, sort of taking, and you can take this any direction you like, but I would love to know 3 years in, kind of what are your biggest lessons around how you approach being a legislator, and what you have learned in this journey, and how it's how it's impacted, how it is that you do this work, recognizing that half of your time in the legislature has been spent during a global pandemic that has had huge ramifications. But would just love some of your thoughts about your early years in the legislature.
One of the things I've learned is how unpredictable this job can be.
Absolutely.
Who would have known that I was going to be legislating during a global pandemic? But, supporting our community through that has really been an incredible honor and important work. But I think one of the things I've learned is, I come out of litigation, right? Where you're often forced into a settlement setting where you're negotiating and you're trying to get to a place where everybody wins and everybody loses and nobody's happy. And that means you had a good day, right? I think one of the things that people don't realize, given the number of Democrats we have, they think we're just the supermajority that all goes the same direction. And that's not true at all. I mean, you can, Buffy Wicks is one of my dearest friends in this body. We came in together, but her district is very different from mine, minutes away, but very different from mine. And so each of us thus is really different. And we're both Democrats and we share a lot of similar values, but we do represent different communities, and that looks different. And so there is still a lot of negotiating that happens. And to get to even 41, as for those who were watching last week, we had several bills die that couldn't get to 41 on the assembly floor. It still can be a challenge because we are not all the same. And so what is that? So I think what I've learned is how I sort of take that skill set of trying to negotiate to a place where everybody wins a little and everybody loses a little and we create better policy is really the work I want to do in this legislature, and how I do that in the setting where sometimes people feel like, well, I'll just get to 41 without talking to you, right? And so how do we force a more collaborative, engaging environment where we get to better policy? Because that is the work, and that is what the legislative process is supposed to do. And I think that, I've really worked on the committees I sit on to be a part of the conversations to force bills to a place where they're workable and they're moving California forward, but they're also, make sense. I mean, I was a regulatory lawyer, so I fully understand what happens when we do things that don't make sense. I used to have to deal with it. Yeah. So I think that's the thing I've learned, is that that's hard. That's hard in this body, but that it's important work and that it's worth it. And I think that I've been able to have those conversations on a lot of pieces of legislation and hopefully make them better.
Great. I wanted to give Linus Uckel, who's the executive director of the John Muir Land Trust. He put a put a question in the chat, or just is encouraging you to be supportive. So he says, with respect to the governor's top priorities, statewide initiatives, and specifically effective 30 by 30 strategies, he's saying, please support investment in existing programs that have been working well for many years at the Wildlife Conservation Board, state conservancies, and let's see, I want to make sure I got to get the rest of that. State conservancies and the climate and agriculture, and address to protect and restore important habitat, open space, and agricultural lands to address climate change and biodiversity. So I figured that might just be a big old yes on your part, but wanted to give you a chance.
I love the question, Linus. Thank you. But yeah, for not question statement. But yeah, no, I mean, the 30-30-30 is a great goal. The legislature is really good. This is, as a former regulatory lawyer, the fascinating thing about this place. We set these goals without much conversation of how we're going to achieve them. And I think what Linus is focused on is really how do we achieve that goal of conserving enough land to ensure that we have those carbon sinks that they are, right? I mean, they're a huge part to fighting climate change. And so, open space has been a huge priority for me in the legislature. My first nonprofit of the year in the legislature was Linus's organization, because I really think open space is so critical, and the work that our local organizations do in our community of protecting open space, I think, is so critical to achieving those goals. But we're fighting right now to preserve Tesla Park, and we'll continue to, which is a critical piece of open space out in Livermore. Again, trying to make sure that we have as much as we can. And, we need to solve our housing crisis, and we need to solve climate change. And those two things can go hand in hand. I truly believe that.
So speaking of housing, back to housing, just in terms of, so there are, and this is something we've asked other members, your colleagues, as we've had these conversations. And so, zoning reform in the form of bills like SB 9 are gaining traction, have gained traction in recent years as a solution for helping to meet California's need for diverse housing options. And as you likely know, as an organization, we were strong supporters of SB 50 in 2019, which hope to increase density near transit and job centers. And so do you see an increase in duplexes and fourplexes in currently single family neighborhoods as a reasonable solution to increasing housing supply in the East Bay? I mean, I know that, yes, you have a different district than your colleague Buffy Wicks, but did want to just sort of get your thoughts about this emerging, like how can we increase the density where we have access to transit, access to great schools? And so would love some of your thoughts about that.
I have a really interesting district too, right? I mean, Dublin is the fastest growing city in California. And then I have other cities that are not. So that's, I mean, I probably have the widest spectrum, I would guess, of my colleagues because of that. But, I think, and I know Alex Marin, I don't know if, they're a huge, I mean, San Ramon is slated to get 4,000 units through that project next to Bishop Ranch, right? Which is, and really focused, although not near transportation, in that 680 corridor, focused on how they connect to BART through a shuttle, and really focused on transportation solutions related to it, but really close to a pretty incredible job center that is booming. So, we do have solutions that are coming in, I think, and then we have cities that are slower to grow and, less willing to want to push forward. And I think even in those cities, right? I mean, if you look at, for example, Pleasanton, which I represent, which has definitely been one of the slower to grow communities, we have this incredible opportunity of right? It's on the BART line. There is this, piece of land next to the BART station with a developer that wants to put some housing on the mall and create a much more vibrant community there. And there's jobs coming in there, Workday and others. Kaiser has a huge headquarters near there. And there's opportunity, right? But I think that's a really exciting project that would be, I think is envisioned to be really dense. And that's a lot smarter to me than putting duplexes way out in the far reaches of Pleasanton, to be totally honest with you. Right. It's going to have more impact, and it's more transit oriented. And, so I don't love, part of what I struggle with every day is, here we have this really interesting solution that is really exciting for a whole host of reasons. And the state's going to come in and be like, no, you can do all these other things that in this community, I think isn't the smartest solution. We have in the communities that you and I live in, we have areas of really severe high fire zones where you wouldn't want as much density, right? But you want it near transit and sort of easier to evacuate areas. And, so I think it is complicated for us to come in with solutions in communities where we need more solutions and we need to do more, but maybe that's not the right solution for that particular city. So how do you find that mix of allowing for local control without local control becoming this issue that keeps people out of our community, that keeps diversity out of our community? And that's the tension that I think we need to really be working on. And the state has an incredible role to play in this housing problem. And I think specifically in making sure that we're providing to, especially the smaller cities I represent. You know, I know there's a big talk. David Chu has been working on this initiative to ensure we're providing resources for planning, right? For smaller cities that, especially post-pandemic, when they let go a lot of their staff, we need to be supporting them in doing this planning process and then funding it, right? I mean, in my district, market rate housing is really easy to get built because you can make a lot of money. But if you try to put in an all affordable housing project in some of my cities, it's really hard because the land is so expensive, right? So how do we get affordable housing in? Which is, if we want diversity and we want more people to be commuting less, we need housing for all of our workers. And so we need to be putting our money where our mouth is and saying, we'll support that. We'll help you do affordable housing in all these communities so it gets built, because cities can zone it. And if it doesn't pencil out, they can't build it. So we have to be making sure we go that extra mile to ensure that we can get it built, and we can diversify our communities, and we can do the projects that we want in our communities. And some cities have succeeded in that and others have not. And we've got to figure out how we can make more successful cities. Yeah.
Well, again, a very complex thing. And I, appreciate your, willingness to support to make sure that the state does play a role, because there are too many cities that hide behind local control and aren't doing what they need to be doing. And it's going to be important that the next RHNA process is not just a bunch of, just a show for, some sort of happy talk about where all this housing is going to go. And if it doesn't actually lead to more housing, then that's going to be a continued problem for the state, because it's connected to all of these other intractable things, including that too many teachers can't afford to live anywhere near where they're teaching. So I am mindful of time, and we have not actually touched on K-12 at all in this process. And so wanted to just open it up to your, because obviously there has been, actually in the recent days, there's sort of this talk about potentially the legislature demanding accountability around all of the new dollars that are going to schools and have gone to schools to deal with the pandemic and other things. And just wanted to get your sense. I did promise in talking to you, I was not going to spend an hour being a grumpy school board member. But it was a really hard year, and it was hard to be in a district that was actually out in front of the state and having the state lead from behind. And so wanted to just kind of talk to you about how you think things are shaping up K-12 as it relates to the budget, or any other aspects of that as we move to open schools 5 days a week in the fall for all Californians, hopefully. And
don't say hopefully, we're just saying it.
Yeah. Okay, good. I mean, I know it's going to happen in my district, but I represent my district, not the whole state like you do. So wanted to just open it up for K-12.
Yeah, no. And I mean, huge props to you and your school board and, the administration team at Akalani's that just really got it, that our students had to be back on campus, both for their mental well-being and their education and all of it. And, we talked many times during this process, and I said, you had a much harder job than I did during the pandemic. So thank you for your service. But, as a mom of 3 kids, I saw how hard it was to give my first grader an education on Zoom. Really hard. And how our kids suffered. I mean, they need to be together. Like, that is what going to school, it's a lot about learning, and it's a lot about growing up, right? And the growing up part we just put on hold. And that's really problematic. And so, I have been a vocal advocate of getting our kids back on campus, as you know, and have made clear to everybody who will listen many times that I will not vote for a budget that allows schools to do what they did this year. I just won't do it. When we voted on that budget last year, none of us anticipated what would happen. I don't think, I can tell you, not a single member thought that when certain districts were in the yellow, they would stay closed. That just wasn't. Yeah. We were so shocked that what we had created was so, as I personally saw it, abused. I couldn't imagine that. And now knowing that happened, that we will not create a system where that can happen again, because what matters most is our children, and that's full stop. Like I am so grateful for our teachers. I will do everything to keep them safe, but we have to create an environment that allows our children to thrive. And we can do that, and we proved we can do that, and all the data shows we can do it. It shows that it's safe, so we have to believe the science.
Yeah.
So part of what the real struggle is we have communities that are scared, right? They're not ready to send their kids back because they're scared. And so I hear from some colleagues, well, we have to allow for Zoom learning because those communities are scared, even though the science is telling us that we can keep those children safe. And so we really need to create an environment where we support those families in coming back and say, we are doing everything to keep your children safe. And we will continue to do that. And funding was a huge part of that. We knew there were districts where they couldn't afford filters, where the windows didn't open, where kids wouldn't have the resources to buy masks. And it was our job to say, we're going to give you money to buy those filters. We're going to make sure you have the money to buy masks, because kids need to get back on campus, but we have to support you in doing that. And so, I trust that schools, yes, we had schools that were going to open for one day just to get the money. Like that made me angry. I'll be honest.
Oh yeah. It made the budget chair pretty angry because they were schools in his district. So yeah, absolutely.
Oh, no problem. But, so I think that we are looking at a budget that will fund our schools and creating an environment that allows families to feel safe, that allows our teachers to be safe. Although, I'm so grateful that now they are all vaccinated, which, as the data is showing us, keeps you incredibly safe. And so, we have to get back, and I will not settle for any less than 5 days a week. I mean, even when my kids were back 5 days a week, for some reason, they had to get out an hour earlier, so we still couldn't get to our instructional minutes. But next year, we are going to demand those instructional minutes and no less.
Okay.
I will. I guess I should speak for myself.
No, and I mean, well, and I mean, but school working is actually really important for the economy, as is adequate childcare. And, we're supporting increase in funding for childcare providers. They're such a struggling part of the economy and such a linchpin for all of our success. So there's obviously.
And women, I mean, the number of women that left the workforce is just tragic. We have to get them back.
Yeah, absolutely.
So we've got to do
part of it. Well, I am mindful of time, and it is also a bit of a tradition of mine to sort of give you permission to be all powerful. So if you are all powerful as a member of the legislature and could pass any piece of legislation and make any change that you want, and there were no blowback, no consequences, no problem, but it was the most, you could be all powerful to do what you want. What would you do with it? And why?
Oh my gosh, that's a hard question.
But fun, okay, but be visionary.
Totally fun, but really hard, because there's so many things I want to do. It's funny because, again, I spend most of my time working on this mental health crisis response initiative, which 25% of officer-involved shootings are people in mental health crisis. So I truly believe that if we pass this, we will save a lot of lives. And that's the work, right? But I think if I had to pick one, I think it'd have to be climate related. Like I said, it's the thing that keeps me up. I would invest magical amounts of money in carbon capture and clean transportation and creating environments that work and that really dial back the clock on this and allow our kids to have a future that is bright.
All right. Well, having powerful can be hard, but you had it. That's a good, thank you for coming up with a question. I mean, having magical amounts of money to do lots of these things, whether, all of these priorities, whether it's high quality education and critical transportation investments and housing policy and sheltering our unsheltered residents of California, and doing it all in a way that addresses the imperative of racial justice and so many other things that California needs to do, because Black homeownership is lower than it's been since before it was, you could legally discriminate in housing based on race. And so we have so much work that we need to do. And as always, the East Bay Leadership Council is here to be a partner to help you, for us to share what's important to us and to have a dialogue about how we can be supportive of each other. And I just wanted to just say to everybody who's listening in, I really appreciate your responsiveness, your commitment to mental health, your commitment to kids, and your willingness to always take my calls, no matter what hat I'm wearing. And one story about being a school board member in the pandemic I will share as we close is that as Contra Costa finally got to the point where we were going to be in the red tier and we had a plan that was for reopening our schools, there was a little bit of hesitancy because we were going to be opening on a Tuesday, and we were opening in person on the very first day that we possibly could, but there wasn't a specific piece of paper. Nobody had a declaration that it was definitely going to happen. It's just where things were trending. And so there was some of our principals wanted to actually wait a day until we could get that declaration. And I came the closest to losing my mind as a school board member. And so, Rebecca Bauer-Kahan was my first text, and and it was just as I was in a meeting, and I just basically said, I'm not gonna not let us open as soon as we possibly be open. So I appreciate your commitment to helping us do that. So with that, I would just give you a chance if you want to take a minute or two to just kind of close and share any closing thoughts, and we'll wrap for the day.
Well, thank you. I mean, I think, this job entails a lot of different topics, some of which I do have background and expertise on, and a lot of which I don't. And my job is to learn and to represent all of you and the constituents that you work with every day, and to learn from you and to be in partnership with you to do the best I can to ensure that our district is thriving and moving forward and really is what you all envision it to be, which is a thriving economy for everybody. And so, I just am so grateful for the work you guys do every day, Kristin, for your partnership, and for all of you that have, that show up and help me do my job better. I mean, I really think that's what each of you do. And so I see a lot of people on this call who reach out to me regularly, and I get to connect with, and on many different subjects. I saw Carolina from Kaiser pop into the chat. They've been an incredible partner through this pandemic and helping us figure this out and keep our community safe. And, Debbie working to represent our seniors and others. I think you bring so much to the table and so much I can learn from and make me a better assembly member and a better representative. So thank you. Continue to do that. I know that we don't always get this chance to sit down and have an hour-long chat, which is really fun. But as you heard from Kristin, I am available in many ways, and I drive a lot, so it just makes me more accessible, which is nice. But thank you for your partnership and for together making this community thrive.
Great. Well, thank you again for making the time. I do want to just, again, thank our leading members, the members of our board, our members of the East Bay Leadership Council are the reason we're able to do this work. So look for the rest of our Capital series over the rest of the year. And if you have not done so, please get vaccinated. Thank you very much.